weeks ago, and it just seems that everything's going wrong with the guy. I mean, nothing's going well. His health, his finances, his wife, his children, everything's falling apart there. His career is falling apart. Nothing's going well. But apart from that, how was the play, Mrs. Lincoln? The guy's got nothing going for him, you see. And I really didn't have much to say that I could give him by way of comfort. I mean, he didn't have anything going for him. And then I look at other people, and the guy's a follower of Jesus. Then I look at another person. It seems that their life is fairly cushioned. It seems that everything's going reasonably well. And I don't have an answer for this. Why it is that some people live relatively comfortable lives, somewhat insulated, though all of us have a cross to bear. No one avoids that. But still, some people have a great deal easier course in this life than others. Is it because of their virtue? I claim otherwise. This person is actually a very virtuous, very godly man. And in fact, I admire his fidelity and his clinging to Christ in the midst of his adversities. It's something that actually has ministered to me in profound ways. So it cannot be so simplistically reduced to that. So Jesus says, you're not going to get an answer in this world. You won't have a perspective. Even if I gave you the answer, you probably wouldn't understand it. Which is pretty much what we see in the theme of the book of Job. Now, having said that, Jesus does have an application, though. And note that the application, both for the moral evil and also for the what we would call natural or physical evil, is the same. And what is it? I tell you no, but unless you repent, you'll all likewise perish. What he is saying is when you see things like this in this world, see it as a cautionary tale. Your application is to recognize you better look at your own self and make sure that you have a right relationship with the living God. In other words, to be sure that you do not suppose that you're impervious to these things, and the recognition that at the end of the day, you will die of your last disease. You know, by definition, you're going to die of your last disease. I mean, just beyond. I actually had one guy deny this. I felt like it was a world of surrealism when I was talking with this guy. The guy's convinced he's not going to die, but that's another matter, which I won't go into. As you well know, our capacity to deceive ourselves is virtually unbounded. His application is very clear. It reminds me of a word that I heard, I forgot who said it, but he said, I think it was T.S. Eliot who said this. Yeah. He said, I had far rather live my life as I do in constant terror of death than to think that this was merely a child's game in which everyone got equally worthless prizes in the end. What he's saying is this stuff counts. And constant terror of eternity is what he really meant. In other words, what he means by terror is to live my life as if I'm going to die very soon and I'm going to be accountable in this world. Or another way of putting it is this. I would much rather live as if God existed and then discover that find out that he didn't, than to live as if God did not exist and then discover that he did. Which is similar to the Pascal's wager, which has often been, people try to refute it by saying, do you think God's so stupid that it's just a question of believing in him and that if you just come up with the right statements or go to church, he's going to be deceived? But it misses the point of the wager. Pascal's wager is to say that to ignore God is tantamount to, puts you in a dangerous situation. It's not neutral. You see, at the end of the day, with Jesus, you're going to have to move in a direction whether you're going to follow him or pursue him or not. And when I invite people to make an informed decision about what they're going to do with this Jesus, and usually encourage them to read one of the Gospels to do so, I encourage them to make a decision. You will accept him or reject him. Ignoring him is to reject him. If he's offered himself and his life for you, to ignore him is not an option. So you do well to make an informed decision whether you accept him or reject him. That's the whole point of the Gospel of John. The motif is some accepted, some rejected, and he goes through with each of the miracles along those lines. And so what I see going on here then is with the Pascal's wager, as you know, the idea is very simple. That if I turn out, if I basically call upon the name of the Lord and live as if there really is a God, and what that entails, to call upon His name and pursue Him as best as I know. And if I die and it turns out that we're just food for the worms, it's annihilation, what do I lose? What do I lose? The answer is nothing. Actually, I gained something. Yes, it might have been a myth that I lived by, but it gave me some hope instead of despair. So actually, I was in a sense better off, even though it turned out to have been an error. But if, in fact, I did pursue Him and discover that He does exist, what do I gain? I gain everything. Now, you can see the opposite. That if a person lives one's life as if God does not exist, and indeed He does not, they gain what? What do they gain? They gain nothing. They didn't lose anything, but they didn't gain anything. But if suppose that God does exist, and they denied that, and it turned out that He does, and they stand before Him, they lose everything. You see. And this is why it's interesting. When Richard Dawkins was asked about this business, what will you do if you discover that God does exist? You know what his arrogant statement was? He said, well, I'll ask Him why He didn't give me any more evidence. And I can tell you what I really believe will happen at that time. What's going to happen is He's going to discover to his horror that the evidence was right in front of his face all his life, and he denied it every day of his life. That's what he will discover. He will not make such a question or a statement to God, I can assure you. God will be vindicated, and all will recognize that He is who He claimed to be. So it comes down then to this issue then of whether one will pursue Him or whether one will deny Him. But at the end of the day then, we have everything to gain. I'm not going into the details here, but even if the probability were even 1 in 10 that God existed, which would be the bet you'd want to wager? You see the idea? I would rather pursue Him as if He did exist and then discover that He didn't. And so you get the idea. That's the logic. And while that debate or that argument has been often debated, I think that there is still some merit to it, because it relates to this issue that unless you repent, what does repent mean? Change your thinking. You might have been getting a little bit arrogant, you see, and you might suppose you're a better person than this other person, and that's why it didn't happen to you. Unless you repent, you're going to all likewise perish. And indeed, the fact is that all of us in this world are, in fact, mortal. We're going to, in one sense, and all of us are going to perish unless Christ comes, and I pray that He does, Maranatha, when Paul describes we shall not all sleep. But having said that, though, we will, in fact, be a people who go on. Even when this world is not around, we are going to endure. The fact is, you and I are actually immortal beings. And as C.S. Lewis put it in The Weight of Glory, immortal splendors or everlasting horrors. So you have this thing. You cannot eliminate the fact that you will continue long after this world is gone. And so we have this orientation or point of view or perspective that I think we need to embrace. Given all this, I'm saying here that God uses these things in our lives to give us a reminder in a world where there is no immediate consequence morally, necessarily, or physically from immoral actions and so forth. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. It gives us a reminder. And C.S. Lewis, in The Problem of Pain, which I just taught for the Great Books series, puts it this way: the settled happiness and security which we all desire, God withholds from us by the very nature of the world. But pleasure and merriment He has scattered broadcast. We are never safe, but we have plenty of fun and some ecstasy. It is not hard to see why. The security we crave would teach us to rest our hearts in this world and oppose an obstacle to our return to God. In other words, if you got full security in this world, who needs God. A few moments of happy love.